Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our November 12th State Board of Education meeting. I'm glad to see everyone that has made it into the building and our members that are zooming in from home. Hold on, let me, mic. Oh, no, that's not me. And those who are joining us. One moment. Okay, thank you. All right, little technical difficulties. But thanks for everyone that is joining us on Zoom. Glad to see everyone back. We have a new face this morning, and Dr. Pfeffer is just going to introduce and just kind of let us know.
Yes, good morning, everybody. And I wanted to introduce all of you to Brittany Kincaid. Brittany is up here. Several of you may know her, but if you don't, Brittany is going to be staffing State Board of Ed meetings and taking minutes. So she'll be a familiar face for all of you. She is here because Ms. Tiffany Donovan, that I know many of you know Tiffany. Tiffany is going to be taking on a new role still within the Department of Ed, so we're happy about that. A little sad though because I won't get to have her next door to me every day, but she'll be working at the Division of Higher Education. So we're really proud of Tiffany. We're going to miss her in this role, but she's going to do great. So we just wanted to make sure all of you knew about that change. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. Welcome, Ms. Kincaid. We're glad to have you as part of the team. Thank you. All right, well, we're going to get right into the agenda. Next up, we have our resolutions, and our presenter is going to be Anthony Owen for the Computer Science Week. Okay. All right, well, while we wait for him, why don't we have our moment of silence just to get us started. I always like to do this at the beginning just to give us an opportunity to center our thoughts and our mind around why we're here and the work that we do and why we're serving on this board, and put our focus on the students of Arkansas and what we can do to make Arkansas a better place for them to get a whole child education. So if you would join me in a moment of silence. Okay, thank you. Well, let's see. Is Mr. Owens going to be able to join us this morning? Okay. All right, then let's just move on. Do we have any changes to the agenda? Okay. All right, if not, then let's move to the consent agenda. Do we have any questions or any items that would like to be pulled on the consent agenda? Ms. Newton?
I have some questions on item 3 and item 4 on the
Okay.
consent agenda.
All right, item 4. Anyone else? Okay, Ms. Newton?
On item 3, I was just because of the COVID and how it's affecting schools, I was just curious to know how are our long-term sub numbers and ALP numbers doing this year compared to this time last year?
Yes.
Carly Saraceni, Assistant Commissioner of Educator Effectiveness and Licensure, and the numbers compared from this year to last year. On ALPs, we were about, this year we're currently 509 Last year at this time, we were 357, so they've somewhat increased. Year to date on ALPs, we have 1,079, and last year we had approximately around 1,300. So it's, they still trickle in throughout the school year in case someone leaves. So, we usually get, but the bulk of them are in now. On long-term subs, 200 versus 304, which is about right. And then, of course, our ETPs are up. It was in the 200s last year, and it's 374 at this time total. So if you would like the total numbers that we have occurred so far this year, so you can compare to last year, is ALPs to date, 1,079. And these are teachers who have a standard license that is teaching out of field, out of area. But they already do have a license. The ETPs are our emergency teaching permits, and with COVID back in the spring, Praxis and Pearson shut down for that time. So these are a lot of those students that have just come out of programs. So I just want to give you some context so you don't think that number's huge. And year to total is 374. So as the Praxis, now you can take it at home, and so now it's becoming more are passing. They're getting to take the exam. Okay, so that's why those numbers may be. Year to date on long-term subs are 304. And so when you look at long-term subs may be for, some people have taken a leave for a year due to COVID, and also maternity leaves, anything that's longer than 30 days. So I just wanted to give you some context of these numbers.
We've seen some increase, but not huge increases, so it's, okay, fairly stable. Okay. All right, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead, Ms. Newton.
On item 4, since this person was under a 1240 waiver and not a licensed teacher, and the violation, if it was a teacher, would probably have led to revocation, would this person be able to come back at any point and apply for a teaching license in Arkansas or maybe even another state?
Definitely not in Arkansas. He will be listed in NASDAQ, the national system, as a denial for due to sexual misconduct.
Okay, so definitely not in Arkansas and probably not in another state then.
Most likely. I know he is not in the teaching field now.
Okay, all right, I just want to make sure of that. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions? Okay. All right, then we'll move on with our agenda. Action agenda. I'm sorry. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda? Okay. Motion by Sarah Moore, seconded by Ms. McFetrich. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Seeing none, motion passes. Now we'll move on to the action agenda. We have State Board Status Review, Jerry Lynn Odom.
Good morning.
I'm sorry, I jumped the gun.
Ms. Douglas.
Good morning. We are here just for a state board review. Last October, Ms. Odom's license was suspended via state board order, and she was ordered to do drug treatment. I believe you got an email this morning of some drug screens that were negative. I don't really have anything to say. Her attorney's online, so I think they will do the talking and answering any of your questions.
Okay. Good morning.
Morning.
Ms. Hensley?
Hello there.
Mr. Hensley, there we go. Mr. Hensley, good morning.
Good morning.
Does anyone have any questions of Mr. Hensley?
Could you just give us an update of how things are going with Ms. Odom?
You could give us an update, Mr. Hensley. We appreciate it.
Yes, thank you for asking. Ms. Odom, back in October, consented to discipline based on some issues she had with drugs. She's got that matter, it looks like, taken care of. I sent your attorney 5 different tests that were all negative, of course. There was 2 more. There were 2 more. We could not get in touch with the people who actually did that test because they are doing COVID tests and would not give those to us at this point. We're still trying to get them, but these are 5. There was like 4 or 5 in a row, and then a month or so, and then another one. Miss Odom had limited funds to do things with the counseling, and that requirement that we've been trying to get done. It's just almost impossible. Everybody's doing COVID tests. There's not helping. We had trouble finding some help to do counseling, but once we get if we can get our job back, we'll certainly continue doing the counseling because the insurance will take care of it also. But we would do things like church counseling, private, things like that, but it wasn't what we really wanted. It was enough to get us to where we're fine now, but that's where we are now. Everything's cleaned up, ready to go. Y'all have any questions?
Any more questions? Any questions?
I want to say congratulations. The hair drug tests go back 3 months, by the way, if you guys don't know that. So she has done remarkably well.
Thank you so much.
That it wasn't easy, but it was important to her. So
Yeah.
Thank y'all for giving her this chance.
Absolutely. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Hensley. And keep going forward and keep up the good work, Ms. Odom. Glad to
Thank
hear
you
this
so much.
good report.
Thank you.
I do.
Thank you, Ms. Douglas.
Can I ask a question of the department?
Yes. Ms. Moore has a question. Dr. Moore, I mean.
So originally, this was a revocation of license, and we decided to do the 1-year suspension with checks along the way. Is that correct?
I believe that
Yes.
is correct.
Okay. Oh, and so I'm looking at the sanctions that we imposed last year, 1-year suspension, a complete drug treatment, inpatient basis. Have all of those been fulfilled?
Having the drug treatment wasn't able. We couldn't. I mean, other than it being cost prohibitive, we would do what we could. But as far as going through an organized drug test type facility, that did not happen. But I don't think the department really. They just wanted to make sure we were doing something. That was what it was kind of billed as. We certainly wish we could have done even an inpatient drug treatment plan, but we just didn't have the money for that. So we did what we could. We did the testing, went to church. We would go to AA, places like that when we were able to, but we'll be back. We'll be doing the drug treatment if y'all are kind enough to let us go back to work, because then we'll have the insurance. We'll keep doing that until she has several partners that's helping her, including me. She has my cell phone anytime. She and her family are welcome at my house. I live in Greenbrier, Worcester area. She's in the Benton area. She's not that far away. I hear from her regularly, and I just call her out of the blue too. So there's several people that kind of keep her feet to the fire, but as far as going to organized drug counseling, that has not fully been done. We have done some, but it has not done some. But something like that is probably going to be a very long time, if not lifelong.
Okay, and so thank you for sharing that for the department. So today, what is our action to be taken, or what are our options for actions to be taken?
I don't really believe that you need to do an action. I guess you can accept her drug screens as in lieu of inpatient treatment. Her suspension would effectively have been over last month. We're here for review you have the option of accepting that or extending it to allow her to go into inpatient. I think that she's done a great job of trying to show her sobriety, so
Okay.
I don't have an objection to reinstatement.
Okay. Thank you.
We need to go straight to reinstatement, or do we need to go through a probation period? I'm not sure exactly how this works.
There's no requirement that you go through a probationary period. So today you would, accept her drug treatment or her drug screens as affected per the order, and then she would just go on to renew her license and such, because her suspension would be over.
Okay.
Okay. Well, and with that in mind, I'm looking for a motion to accept her treatment and let her move forward with going into teaching again or something else.
With congratulations to Ms. Odom, I move that we accept what she has done and urge her to stay on this track and just continue what she's doing, and know that she has our support, and that we don't want to see her back again with anything like this again.
Thank you.
So we have a motion by Ms. Newton. Do I have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Williamson. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none, motion passes. Congratulations, Ms. Odom. Thank you, Mr. Hensley.
Sure enough. I'll talk with Mr. Taylor, your attorney, and we'll go from there. Is there any other questions y'all have?
I don't believe so. Y'all have a great
I
day.
do. Y'all, thank y'all so much. Good job. Bye-bye.
All right, Ms. Douglas, we have the State Board Review Ethics Hearing Committee recommendation for Katrina Alumbaugh. Ms. Freno?
Thank you, Ms. Dean.
Yes.
Madam
You're welcome.
Chair, Lori Freno, Department of Education. This is an appeal of the Ethics Hearing Subcommittee's recommendation that Katrina Allenbaugh's license be revoked, her educator license. Ms. Allenbaugh is here today, and she is represented by an attorney, Matt Campbell, and Amy Douglas is here on behalf of the PLSB. I'd like to first go over the procedures for this hearing. First, Ms. Allenbaugh or her lawyer may make a statement of up to 10 minutes, and then Ms. Douglas would likewise have 10 minutes to make a statement. Additional time can always be granted at the chair's discretion. Board members may ask questions to the educator, to her lawyer, or to a PLSB, or to any lawyer or PLSB investigator at any time during the hearing. Testimony by non-lawyers must be under oath. Following the hearing, the board must make 3 decisions. First, you'll need to make a finding of fact. And what that is, in other words, you'll need to determine whether you agree with the Ethic Hearing Subcommittee's decision with regard to the facts of this case. Second, if you do agree with the facts underlying the subcommittee's decision, you'll need to determine whether, based upon those facts, Ms. Allenbaugh violated Standard 1, Standard 2, or both, or neither, of the Code of Ethics for Arkansas Educators. Third, if you find that Ms. Allenbaugh violated Standard 1, Standard 2, or both, you then must decide whether you agree with the sanction that has been imposed in this case, which again was a revocation of her educator's license. And it would be best if you would take up these 3 issues in 3 separate motions.
Yes, ma'am.
And if no one has any question, I will turn the floor over to Ms. Allenbaugh's attorney.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Freno.
Morning.
Good morning.
My name is Matthew Campbell. I'm here on behalf of Ms. Allenbaugh. And I'm going to start and finish, I guess, with the same general idea. That I just want to make it clear from the outset that we are not, I don't want it to come across at any point that I'm suggesting, or that Ms. Allenbaugh is suggesting, that we don't think that there should be discipline imposed in this. We absolutely agree that there should be a level of discipline. Our argument is that that discipline should stop short of revocation of her license, and we base that on a number of factors. Specifically, at the PLSB hearing, there was the initial report, and then we had our PLSB hearing, and the sort of contrary to evidence that actually came out during that hearing, actual admissible evidence, the PLSB adopted the report just in its entirety, despite the fact that there were allegations and assertions in the report that had not been supported at all during the hearing. And I guess big picture first is we disagree with the idea that there should be a revocation of her license. And the reason for the disagreement is the actual weighting factors in the PLSB rules. They give us a list, and the list, there's overlap in between each of the lists, as we go from sort of no discipline all the way up to termination. But the weighting factors for when revocation is appropriate are multiple violations, violations that occur over a period of years, moderate to high level of negative impact on the student, high level of damage to loss of or misuse of school district property or funds, willful or intentional violation of the code of ethics, active child maltreatment, criminal offenses involving a student. In this case, as I'll explain it shortly, the only one of those weighting factors that is arguably present is that there are multiple violations. And I'd ask that you kind of hold that in your head, come back to it, just because I want to sort of knock off these other ones. There was no, I don't even think that they are arguing that there was any kind of loss of or damage to property or funds. So that's not an issue. There was no evidence or testimony presented about a negative impact on the student. I'm not saying that there was or was not. I'm just saying that at this hearing, there was no evidence presented of that. And by extension, I think any assumption of what kind of impact, especially if we're having to narrow it down to whether there's a moderate to high level or something less than that, when there's no evidence of an impact on the student, I think any sort of assumption of where that would fall would be improper. There was no finding of child maltreatment by DHS, no finding of criminal activity by the Arkansas State Police, both of which actually did an investigation and didn't find either of those. And the PLSB's own report stopped short of accusing Ms. Allenbaugh of a willful or intentional violation, because it only went so far as to state that she should have known. It didn't state that she did know and just willfully violated. So all we have is the multiple violations. And I would just point out that these multiple violations were part of a series of events with a student rather than, I guess, sort of multiple separate violations of the code of ethics. I know that Ms. Jackson's position is each one of these messages, text messages, could be, considered a violation on its own. To which I would only point out that the only messages that were actually included as evidence at the hearing, there were only a few messages, and none of them standing alone, even on its face, is something that would rise to the level of termination. Should the messages have been sent? No. Do the messages alone or together, the actual messages that we've seen and that are evidence, do they alone or together warrant termination? Absolutely not. They fall short of that. Related to that issue is the fact that there's this talk of whether there were more messages and something beyond what you see in the actual evidence. The problem is those messages were never obtained. We don't have any sort of screenshots or any kind of evidence or testimony to say what those other messages were in a way that would suggest that the messages standing alone should warrant termination. But my bigger point here, as far as this particular weighting factor is that this weighting factor, multiple violations, doesn't automatically mean termination. Multiple violations is also a weighting factor for suspension. I mean, it's right there in the actual guidelines. So to only look at whether there are multiple violations and say, because there were, that warrants termination, creates a situation where conduct that would warrant a suspension because of multiple violations also warrants termination of a license because of the same multiple violations, without any sort of distinction or looking beyond just that one weighting factor. Our other issue is the PLSB in their final determination said that they recommend the termination of her license based on the following rationale. And then in that rationale, two of the things they list were the educator gave the student rides around the city and to restaurants, and that the educator paid for haircuts, shoes, a hoodie, and other items for multiple students. Regarding the first one of those, that she gave rides around the city, that's simply false, and there was no evidence to support that at all. Ms. Allenbaugh testified that that didn't happen. There was no testimony to contradict that. All that there was testimony from Mr. Greer talking about something that he heard secondhand from an unspecified person. And even if we agree that, you know, the rules of hearsay are relaxed a bit in this kind of hearing, that still doesn't change the fact that we have actual sworn testimony saying didn't happen, and we have sort of a recollection of what somebody heard from a third party without any details to actually support it as on the other side. Regarding the finding that Ms. Allenbaugh paid for items for multiple students, I object to that being treated as a negative in this instance because it's in the record that Mr. Greer thanked Ms. Allenbaugh for doing that. When she was taking a student to go get a haircut and get some shoes, Mr. Greer texted her that her actions were, quote, awesome, and that she was, quote, a blessing. To turn around and then hold that against her and say that this is a negative when she was doing something that the principal praised her for, it doesn't make sense and doesn't seem sort of in the spirit of the types of things that should support a termination of a license. The PLSB determination only says that its conclusions were based on the following rationale. And then these two factors and some others were thrown in there, but it never says what weight was given to any one of those, how those were supported. So having this rationale without any sort of differentiation or weight given to any of these factors makes the whole underlying rationale kind of problematic in my view. The final determination also lists the aggravating factors that were considered. Two of them, as I just said, the educator picking up the student and a claim that the educator spent, quote, exorbitant amounts of money on two students. As I just said, those were not supported by actual evidence. The other aggravating factors were that the educator acknowledged that she communicated with male and female students via Facebook Messenger, Snapchat text messages, that the students said the educator, the students that the educator communicated with were not her students but came to her classroom, and the educator has 9 years of educational experience. Just sort of taking those in order, as far as the modes of communication between Ms. Allenbaugh and the students, there was no policy that said that she couldn't use any of those modes to communicate with students. And the PLSB's own report noted that she communicated with male and female students alike through these various methods. So just on its face, that's not necessarily an aggravating factor if it didn't violate any sort of school policy. That was just how she was communicating with multiple students. Similarly, if the students that she was communicating with were not her students, but there is no prohibition against teachers communicating with other students, then the mere fact that these were not her students doesn't make the communication an aggravating factor in and of itself. I mean, that seems to be a bit of a stretch. And then finally, it throws in that she has 9 years of teaching experience, but without even saying like whether that's a lot of teaching experience or a little teaching experience, without explaining how that particular number should have made this more or less likely. It's just thrown in there as a statement of fact that she has this number of years and then treated as an aggravating factor without any sort of elaboration. Okay, thank you. I guess I should ask if there's any questions for me or Ms. Allenbar. Okay.
Was this just opening statement, or was this?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
There actually
Douglas.
there are no opening statements for this portion. They get 10 minutes. We get 10 minutes. You get to ask questions of the educator.
Okay.
So I don't know if you want to ask questions of the educator now or.
Okay.
All right, so I want to reserve part of my time for rebuttal after the educator's question. Good morning. I just want to give you guys a little bit. And so I've been practicing law for 14 years. In 6 of those years, I defended clients charged with capital murder facing the death penalty. So I was a public defender for 13 years. So in all of those years, you can ask me about the department, I haven't labored over my argument like I have today. So I just want you guys to know that I take my job very seriously, and I know that today I'm asking you to take her license. So as counsel said, she admits to violating the code of ethics. Your findings of fact in that regard are not that difficult, I don't believe. So the code, though, requires educators to show transparency in their actions and communications. The code further requires educators to set boundaries. Those boundaries encompass the verbal, physical, emotional, and social distances that an educator must maintain in order to ensure security, structure, predictability in education, right? So my argument is that she was not transparent and should not set boundaries with these students. Counsel argues that Appendix D of the rules governing the Code of Ethics, which is a sanctioning guideline. I don't know if you guys have looked at it or not, but so for revocation of a license, it's suggested to have one or more weighting factors. Mr. Campbell argues that at best there's one weighting factor. I would disagree with that. 2 panels of her peers made findings that support 3 of the weighting factors in Appendix D. Multiple violations, willful or intentional violation of the Code of Ethics, moderate to high level of negative impact. Multiple violations. Counsel argues that they stem from a single series of events rather than from multiple separate violations. I would argue that simply because the violation occurred with one student, it doesn't negate that it happened multiple times. It has been said that misconduct is not an event but a process. Willful or intentional violation of the Code of Ethics is also a weighting factor. Each time a teacher interacts inappropriately with a student by sending or receiving nude photos, innuendo emojis, or text messages, it is willful. It's intentional. It's not an accident. So for both of those weighting factors, for me, if it happens 3 times in an hour, 3 times in a month, or 3 times in a year, it is every time it's a separate violation. It's willful and intentional. Moderate to high level of negative student impact. By her own testimony at the hearing, page 69, I believe, of your review packet, she states, and I quote, "Not only did, I hurt my family and friends around me, but my students, my first grade students." So, and then when questioned further about one of the panel members, what impact do you think your behavior had on the high school students that were most directly affected? She said, "I did feel like there was an impact. There was. It was inappropriate. And I feel like I made an impression on them that something like that was okay. And that's not okay. It's wrong." That's a quote from Ms. Allenbaugh herself. As far as aggravating factors go, let's be real. We're not asking you to revoke her license because she communicated with male and female students, or that the students that she communicated were not in her classroom, or because she has 9 years of teaching experience. We're asking you to revoke her license because she was told by administration to be careful with her communications with male students. She continued to text a student after that. She even told the PLSB investigator, "They told me to be careful. He did not ever tell me I could not." She acknowledged she was flirting with the student during their text message exchange. She acknowledged receiving and sending inappropriate sexual pictures from a student and to a student. She sent a picture of her breast and received a picture of a child's penis. She's here today to ask for leniency. I'm asking you not to make her actions acceptable. Lowering the sanction does not protect the children of Arkansas. I'll reserve the rest of my time.
Thank you, Ms. Douglas. You have 5.5 minutes left. Let's get questions. Ms. Woods?
Good morning. Out of curiosity, I did a quick search, but there is no ongoing criminal investigation related to this case. That's correct. You contend that that multiple violations shouldn't automatically equal revocation, and I think the issue, at least for me in this case, is that even if there was one violation, it's sort of egregious. Would you not agree with that?
I do, and that's why I wanted to make clear that this isn't the type of thing where we're saying, hey, you know, this was minor and she shouldn't be disciplined. I mean, we are, you know, sort of falling on the grenade here in terms of, you know, the full amount of suspension that this board could impose. We wouldn't bat an eye. We wouldn't complain at all. We have a teacher that made a mistake, a bad mistake, and isn't trying to deny that now. She had an exemplary teaching record before. She's taught for nearly 2 years since this happened. She's still teaching. She hasn't had any other issues whatsoever. And we're saying, like, on the totality of circumstances, suspend her license for as long as you possibly can if you feel that that's what's necessary. Don't take a good teacher out of the system based on this, is our entire argument. I don't disagree for a second that it was egregious.
Dr. Moore?
So can you explain, at the year of these incidences, what grade were you teaching?
I'll let you answer.
Whoever wants to answer.
Hello, I was teaching first grade,
Okay. And currently, what grade do you teach?
third grade.
Okay. In another district?
Mhm.
Okay. And so similar to that, in looking through the evidence, the main issue occurred between high school students. How and to the effect did you even know these high school students if you're teaching elementary school?
The superintendent, she asked, I've gone through a lot of dyslexia interventions training, and she asked me, there are several high school students who were not able to read or on the lower reading level, and she asked me and another one of my colleagues if we could do intervention with them.
Okay, so you were teaching those students at the time. Okay. And at that point in time, did you have inappropriate relationship or messages with multiple students? Or
No,
just one?
Just one.
Okay. And from there, did you leave the district by choice after that year?
I resigned.
Okay. At this point in time, do you have any contact with high school students?
No, ma'am, none whatsoever.
Okay. And is your current district aware of these proceedings?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. That's all right now.
Thank you, Doctor.
I just have questions of the state, of Amy.
Okay.
Ms. Douglas, if you don't mind.
Ms. Douglas?
Thank you. I guess I don't understand. So it says was there an investigation by DHS or the state police?
There was an investigation by state police. Some of the interview with the student, it was included in your state board packet.
Okay, and that interview, that student was 18 years old, is that correct?
I believe they turned 18.
Okay, does that make a difference had they been under age of 18?
I
Does
don't
that
know
have any bearing?
what the state police based their decision on.
Okay.
To not file charges.
Was there so because they did not file charges, is that why DHS did not do a hearing?
I don't know anything about her DHS proceedings.
Okay,
She would have to speak to that.
okay, could I have you all speak to that?
Both DHS and state police, they cited it was unfounded. They did not find any evidence that I was messaging or doing anything with a minor.
Okay, was it unfounded because it was evidence that was destroyed, or was it unfounded because of, Snapchat goes away, so.
Yeah, no,
was
they
that-
had everything printed. So
Okay.
they just said that they didn't see anything that was detrimental or that
Okay,
could lead to a prosecution.
okay. Okay, now back to the state, sorry. And Ms. Douglas, so.
If I might add on that real quick.
Yes.
So the sexual Snapchats that were sent were brought to the principal. They didn't screenshot them. There was no physical evidence
Right.
of the pictures that were sent. The student did tell the principal, hey, I can get you more photos and prove it. But they obviously told him to cease communication immediately.
Okay.
Ms. Allenbaugh, I have a question for you. I think the thing that just causes me pause is when your principal told you to be careful with your communications, you came back with, but he didn't tell me I couldn't do it. And as an educator for 9 years, why would you think that was okay? I guess is where I'm going with this. Our standard here is a preponderance of the evidence. It's not, beyond a reasonable doubt. And so that's a low threshold. And that just seems to me a pretty, somebody with 9 years of experience, I would have expected to have better discretion.
Right. So in January.
Could you also take your mic? Sorry.
So in January, he and the high school principal, they called me in and just said, we know you're helping. You guys have been over. We just don't want, anybody to say anything. And I said, well, if that's the case, I will not step foot back over there. I will not go back over there. And he said, no. That's not what we're saying. That's not what we're saying. Just be careful with your actions.
Is this, at this point in time in your relationship, had this already escalated or no?
No.
Any further questions? Ms. Newton?
Ms. Allenbaugh, is there any kind of restraining order, or has there been any kind of restraining order in the past between you and any student?
No, ma'am.
I guess I do have a question. So we, in cases here, we want to see, the recommendation is revocation. And so we need to have enough evidence and belief to overturn that decision. And so I want to hear from you a pattern of changed behavior, we have assurances that this would never happen again in order to change that recommendation, if that makes sense.
Well, the first thing where I messed up was having students' friends on social media. I don't have Snapchat, period. And then no one actually under 25 on Facebook unless they're a family member. This has a pit in my stomach every single day. I did actually speak to my superintendent and the deputy superintendent. I teach at Forest City School District, and they were both supportive and wanted to know how they could help. I've said it over and over and over again. It has just made me so sick. I would never ever dream of anything like that ever again.
Did you bring any of this to your administration at the time, or did this all come out after a student reported it?
No. Oh, wait, in my new district?
No, in the cause of action, so in your old district.
Yeah, it literally happened on, I believe it was March the 16th, and then March the 20th, or it was like, then there was spring break, and then right after that is.
But you didn't self-report, this came from the student?
Right.
Okay.
Any other questions? Okay. Ms. Douglas?
Page 88 of your state board packet, a student sends emojis, an eggplant, a peach, drops of water. Allenball sends back, emojis back, big eyes multiple times, a winking smiley face. A little bit later, you trying to get me in trouble? Page 100, at the bottom, the student is being questioned by state police. I texted it, and then we started a streak. He goes on to speak of the text exchange just mentioned. 103, student talking to state police. State police. So you sent her a picture. What did you send her a picture of? My meat. Okay, you said your meat. Student nods head. Okay, and then she sent you a picture. What did she send you a picture of? Like her titties and her coochie. Okay, and in the picture is, how are her clothes? She ain't have none on. Okay, so tell me how you knew for sure that was her. Because like she had her phone. Like at first, like when I first added her on Snapchat, she had just sent a picture of her face. That's when we started doing all that. Then some days, like she had a picture of her face and her chest, like sexy. She had a nightgown on or something. Page 105. I was just wanting to see how far it was gonna go. This is the student. So I was edging it on. Okay, so how far did it go? Like she was trying to pick me up and take me places. Okay, and then she said she would suck me up and all that. Okay, when did she say that? Like after the day she was sending a picture. At the bottom of page 126, while I communicated with student 2 about sex, and I considered having sex with him, I would have never done so because my conscience would not allow me. As a state board, you're in a trusted position to elevate the teaching profession and protect the children of Arkansas. It's undoubtedly an honor that you're chosen. 2 panels of her peers found the appropriate level of punishment is revocation. The children of Arkansas should not be punished for the poor choices of Ms. Allenball. Her mistake is not okay by any standard, but especially in education. She said it herself. I made an impression on them that something like that was okay, and that's not okay. That's wrong. She's right. It is wrong. It's wrong not just in education, it's wrong in life. Asking you to revoke a teacher's license is not something that PLSB takes lightly. Each panel considers the conduct of the educator and the impact on students. The impact of her actions not only affected the students she interacted with inappropriately, but also her first graders. It's never okay for an adult to send a picture of their breast to a child. We cannot allow the educators of Arkansas to conduct themselves in this manner. You can't excuse this behavior. There's only one reasonable sanction, and it's revocation. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Douglas. Do we have any questions or further discussion? Mr. Sutton.
Just a question. Did I understand, did this happen? When did this happen?
Ms. Douglas.
2019.
Okay, I thought I heard 2 years.
Ms. Newton.
I don't have any more questions. I do have a comment.
Okay.
I am heartbroken that this happened. And you know, as much as I would love to give mercy to Mr. Allenball, I have to think about the students of Arkansas. And my first responsibility is to them. And I cannot, in good conscience, do anything less than revocation.
Thank you, Ms. Newton. Any other further comments or discussion? If not, we have 3 decisions.
I do. Hey,
Okay.
When
Dr. Hill.
we revoke licensing over a period of time, can a person reapply over after 5 years or so of therapy or good, you know?
I believe the law recently changed to allow an educator to reapply after 10 years. I do not believe, however, if it's revoked due to sexual misconduct, that is allowed.
Okay.
So that's the deal.
Thank you, Ms. Douglas, for that
I didn't know if it
clarification. Okay, any further discussion?
Make a motion.
I got a question real quick. Back on that.
Okay, Mr. Williams?
So if we revoke a license, they can come back in 10 years and reapply. Is that what I just heard?
If it does not have to do with sexual misconduct, in this case, it has to do with sexual misconduct, so
Right.
she would not be able to come back.
And after 10 years, they would have to come back in front of, if you revoke a license, they would have to come back to you
Right,
for
Okay.
they couldn't just reapply.
right. They'd have to come back before the state board.
Even with.
But
that,
not in
I
this
mean,
case.
it doesn't even come back at all because
At
of
all,
sex. That's
yeah.
what I'm saying.
Correct.
Okay, yeah.
Okay. Any further discussion? Okay, so we have 3 items or decisions that we need to make. The first being the finding of fact. Do we agree with the hearing decision? So let's take that one first. Do we have a motion or discussion or questions or anything?
I'll motion that we accept the findings of fact.
Okay, I have a motion by Ms. Woods to accept the findings of fact. Seconded by Ms. Newton. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none, motion passes. Second item that we need to decide is whether, to determine whether Ms. Allenbaugh violated Standard 1 or Standard 2, or she violated both Standard 1 and Standard 2. Do we have any discussion? If not, then I'm ready for a motion.
I'll motion to accept that she find that she violated standard 1 and 2.
We have a motion by Ms. Woods for determination of violation of standards 1 and 2. I have a second. Seconded by Ms. McFetrich. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none, motion passes. Third is, do we agree with the sanctions that were given as recommendations from the PLSB? If there's no discussion, I'm ready for a motion.
To agree to the sanction?
I have a motion by Ms. McFetrich to agree to the sanction of PLSB for the revocation of license and a fine of $500. I think that's what it was.
I believe the evidentiary hearing panel did not give a fine.
No,
It was just
okay.
revocation
I'm sorry,
without
wrong case. Okay, so,
No, there was a $500. It was permanent revocation and a $500 fine.
okay, all right. All right, so motion to agree with the PLSB findings, sanctions, revocation, $500 fine. Do we have a second? Seconded by Ms. Woods. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none, motion passes. Go ahead, Ms. Douglas. Oh, you don't have anything? Okay. Ms. Allenbaugh. I hope that you take this experience and you learn and you grow from it. And that you realize how important our children are to us. And how important it is to safeguard them and to protect them, their minds, their hearts, their emotions, their physical being. Our children are precious to us. And your role as a teacher is someone that we trust with our babies. And it's not a role that we take lightly. You're someone that the community trusts to take care of the children. So in this situation, we need to make it known and let it be known. We don't take that lightly. As a community, as a state, as a country, our children are precious to us. So take this experience, learn from it, grow from it. And I wish you well in life. And I hope that you can find another career that is fulfilling to you and move forward in life. But thank you. Thank you, Mr. Campbell. Thank you. Okay. Let's see, next we have on the agenda the consideration of charter authorizing panel decisions. Ms. Tracy Webb.
Good morning. The first item is the application for a district conversion charter for the Cave City Middle School. In October, the charter authorizing panel approved the district conversion charter for Cave City Middle School Career and Collegiate Preparatory for a period of 5 years. The school will serve a maximum of 375 students in grades 6 through 8 and will offer a traditional and a hybrid program, as well as an online program for students. We do have Dr. Cheryl Bell on the line or on Zoom, should you have any questions.
Okay. Thank you. I'm
Hi,
sorry.
thank you.
There we go. There, I was trying to find you. Good morning, Ms. Bell. Welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having us today.
Okay. Do we have any questions for Ms. Bell? Do you have any a presentation or statements, Ms. Bell?
Oh, we don't have a presentation. We just wanted to say thank you for the opportunity, and we're very excited about our charter status and what for us for the future.
Thank you, Ms. Bell. All right. Do we have any questions? Ms. Newton?
Comment. I just had a comment. I was very impressed with the thought that you put into it and the engagement that you're going to do with students, especially at the younger ages.
Thank you so much.
Any other comments or questions? Okay. Well, with that,
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, Ms. McFetters. Ms. Bell, were you able to hear her?
Sorry, I didn't hear her.
Okay.
I couldn't hear a single word she said either.
Okay, can you make sure your mic is green? If you just push the button and then you can let go.
Oh, let go. Okay.
That's okay.
There she is.
I'm so sorry.
It's okay.
I noticed that you had 18 community members on a Zoom meeting, and I was just wondering if there was another way was there another opportunity for your community to also hear your presentation, but also a way for them to communicate and ask questions other than the Zoom meeting if they were not able to attend at that time?
Yes, thank you for that question. We actually posted the presentation and the recorded Zoom session to our Facebook page and our school website. And we're a very small knit community. So we see community members at our football game. And so we really went out in the community and did face-to-face conversations with parents that we knew would be interested or not weren't able to attend the Zoom because we live in an area that not everyone has access to the internet. So we knew that we would and talk to some people and let them know our ideas and gather some feedback. So we did a lot of face-to-face. We were delivering meals also at that time. So we would deliver a meal. We would talk to parents about what ideas are. So that's how we handled that.
Ms. Bell, can you get closer to your mic and speak up a little bit more? We're having a hard time deciphering you and hearing you. Thank you.
Sure. Is that a little better?
That is a little bit better. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your response. I thought it was a great, thorough application.
Thank you so
I
much.
appreciate all your effort into it.
Thank you.
Any more questions or comments? Discussion? Okay. Then we're ready for a motion.
Not to review.
We have a motion to not review by Ms. Weta Newton, seconded by Mr. Williamson. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none, motion passes. Congratulations, Ms. Bell, and congratulations, Cave City.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Have a great day. Okay, Ms. Webb?
The next item is a district conversion charter application for the Batesville Charter High School. In October, the charter authorizing panel approved the district conversion charter application for Batesville Charter High School for a period of 5 years. The school will serve a maximum of 2,000 students in grades 9 through 12 and will offer career pathways that will increase opportunities for students to expand their careers and college options. The board may decide to review or not review the application. We
All right.
also have Dr. Jennifer Douglas, Assistant Superintendent, on Zoom if you have any questions.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Douglas, welcome. Thank you for coming this morning, or joining us this morning.
Thank you.
Okay. Do you have any statements or presentation?
We do not have a presentation today, but again, we just want to thank you for the opportunity to serve our students in this manner. We believe in putting students first, and we feel like this is going to help us take a step in that direction, and we just appreciate your consideration of our charter application.
Thank you, Dr. Douglas. Do we have any questions, comments, discussion? All right. Seeing none, I'm ready for a motion.
I move to not accept the recommendation of the charter panel.
Okay. We have a motion to not
Or
review.
not review, I'm sorry.
Yes. No problem. We have a motion to not review by Dr. Moore.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Sutton. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none, motion passes. Congratulations, Dr. Douglas, and congratulations, Batesville Charter High School.
Thank you so much. We appreciate it.
You're welcome. Have a great day. Okay, Ms.
The
Webb.
next item is a district conversion charter application for the academies at Rivercrest High School. In October, the charter authorizing panel approved the district conversion charter school application for the academies at Rivercrest High School for a period of 5 years. The school will serve a maximum of 500 students in grades 9 through 12 through an academy model, allowing for unique educational experiences and opportunities based on student interest. The model includes academies for freshmen, agriculture, technology, general education, and virtual learning. Today, the State Board may decide to review or not review the panel's decision. We have Mr. Harry Alvis, Assistant Superintendent for Rivercrest.
Okay. Good morning, Mr. Albus. I don't see, there you're at, Mr. Albus.
Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for joining us. Do you have any statement or presentation that you'd like to make?
No presentation. I would just like to say I'm really excited about this opportunity. I feel like here at Rivercrest, we're uniquely positioned here in Mississippi County, and with not only our location, but with some of the resources and community support that we have. And I feel like this will help us really help meet the needs of our students. And I'm excited.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Alvis. Do we have any questions for Mr. Alvis? Dr. Moore?
So one of the academies is virtual learning. Is this, I guess a clarification, is a component of these students going to be virtual students, or all the programs virtual or all in person?
No, it just provides an opportunity for portions of each of the programs to be provided virtually. When we say virtual academy, we don't see that as being just one individual pathway that is 100% delivered virtually. We see each one of these academies taking part and having virtual as an aspect of it, but not a 100% aspect of it.
Okay, so by and large, students will be doing these programs in person and barring COVID?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Was that in response to COVID in this year, or was that a prior plan?
No, we actually began this process and thinking through these academies pre-COVID, because we've seen especially with at the college level, there was a shift and a desire for that kind of flexibility for virtual learning. So we saw that it was on the horizon, but COVID kind of pushed us into it way quicker than we had originally anticipated.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, excuse me. I'm ready for a motion to review or not to review.
I move to not review this application.
Okay, we have a motion by Ms. McFetrich to not review. Okay, seconded by Dr. Hill. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none, motion passes. Congratulations, Mr. Alvis. And
Thank
the Academy's
you.
at Rivercrest. Have a great day.
You too.
Thanks. All right, Ms. Webb.
The next item is for a district conversion charter application for the Bologna School District. In October, the charter authorizing panel approved the district conversion charter school application for Bologna Pathways Academy for a period of 5 years. The school will serve a minimum of 700 students in grades K through 12 and will offer an online core content curriculum in addition to service learning, instruction, and differentiated pathways to develop workplace skills. The board may decide to review or not review the charter panel's decision, and we have Dr. Kathy Riggins, the assistant superintendent, on Zoom if you have any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Webb. Good morning, Ms. Riggins. Welcome.
Good morning.
Do you have any statements?
Thank you for allowing me to be here today.
You're welcome. We're glad to have you. All right. Do we have any questions or comments for Ms. Riggins? Ms. Newton?
Dr. Riggins, my question is, one of the things that we've seen, especially during this COVID season, is the problem with engagement of students with online learning. I'm assuming that you've kind of already started doing some of these service things with your students. Are you seeing that it has a positive impact on engagement with the online students?
Well, actually, we have not actually completed a project yet, but that is something that we plan to work on and go ahead and start in the spring. Okay. But we have experience with service learning, and we have seen how that can bring engagement to students. So we feel like that's what we need here to add this piece to our virtual program. And we actually feel that we've learned a lot in the first few weeks being in a virtual setting. And so that's why we really, our original thought was before the virus, we had planned on having some type of virtual learning because that was the demand of our community. But we have just learned so much, and especially with the science of reading. And we know how children learn to read, and we feel like this service learning component is going to allow us to make sure that we're using those instructional strategies at the lower levels and in developing those soft skills. So we have not actually had a service learning project at this point, but we are planning to start those.
As you start them and you start seeing the impact, and if you're seeing just really positive impact on engagement, I really wish that you would somehow or another share it with us or different districts around, because I think that as a state, that's something that we're struggling with is engagement. And so if we can find something that works, we really need to share it with everyone.
Yes, ma'am, and we would love to do that. And we really feel like that we looked at a lot of other data, for instance, screen time. What do we know about screen time? And we're very concerned about that and what seems to be a traditional virtual option for children. So we're working to make sure that we offer these opportunities so that children have a blended option and that they're not really on a computer all day.
Right. Okay. Thank you very much.
Dr. Moore?
So just to clarify for that though, this will be 100% virtual for all K-12 students that choose it. Is that correct?
No, ma'am, it will not. There will be a core virtual component to it, but as well, we have opportunities for children to come for field experiences on site. We have partnerships that are established that they will be going, for instance, in our 912 program, we have the commercial construction component. They'll have 2 pathways, a workforce or college prep. They may go on site at the college level for, say, construction camps. They may visit Napos Construction in Conway, Arkansas, one of our lead partners, where they may go through a lab where they've created total stations for students to become aware of those opportunities for the workforce. We will connect the core curriculum to the career focus. And so while students are going to have a career option, a core option that is online, it will also be connected to opportunities for on-site learning at the district level and in various partnership locations and the community.
That's great, and it was great to hear about your commercial construction and all the partnerships that go into that. If students want to do the commercial construction pathway, will they have to be enrolled in this portion of your school, or can they do that at the traditional high school as well?
They will be enrolled in the charter to start. They will be enrolled in the charter school.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, comments? Okay, seeing none, I'm looking for a motion to review or not to review.
Not to review.
I have a motion by Ms. Newton to not review.
Second.
Seconded by Dr. Moore. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none, motion passes. Congratulations, Ms. Riggins, and congratulations, Vilonia.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Ms. Webb?
The next item is a district conversion charter application for the Pulaski County School District. In October, the charter authorizing panel approved the district conversion charter school application for Driven Virtual Academy for a period of 5 years. The school will serve a maximum of 900 students in grades K through 12 through a 100% virtual program. The state board may decide to review or not review the charter panel's decision, and we have Ms. Rachel Blackwell. She's the coordinator of the virtual program on Zoom if you have any questions.
Thank you. Good morning, Ms. Blackwell.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Dr. McNulty, Superintendent.
I'm sorry?
Dr. McNulty, Superintendent.
Good morning, Dr. McNulty. Glad to have you. Do you have any statements or any sort of presentation that you'd like to say?
I have no presentation. We're just excited about this opportunity. This was all pre-COVID planned for the last several years, and so we're just excited to offer this for our students.
Thank you. Have any questions or comments? Dr. Moore?
Thank you all for being here today. I know that is great that you were planning this pre-COVID, because I would expect that to have helped you shifted during this time better. And I know there are other districts in the state that also already offer virtual programs such as you're proposing. But I will be voting not to review, but I did want to narrow in on a specific question about your elementary school. I noticed that you're going to give parents options of block or 2 courses per day, and I do have a little bit of concern about the, as an elementary student only doing English twice a week, even though I know those are longer periods. So I did want to hear a little bit about that.
For the elementary, that would not be a suggestion. That was more for our secondary to have block scheduling or to maybe do 1 course at a time, because it is important at the elementary level to make sure you hit all the core classes each day.
Okay. So you all will start the school next year, and I'm assuming will you be recruiting students from anywhere to come to your virtual program?
That is correct. Our goal is for homeschool and students who are not currently, that are zoned for the district but not currently attending. And then also we'll open it up for school choice.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions? Okay. If we have no further questions, I'm ready for a motion to review or not to review.
I move to not review.
Okay, I have a motion by Brett Williamson to not review, seconded by Ms. McFetrich. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none, motion passes. Thank you, Ms.
Thank you so much.
Madam Chair, may I say something?
Yes, please.
Before they leave, I just want to take a minute and say hello to my former student, Rachel Blackwell. So anyway, I didn't want to say anything before the vote, but all this great work here, she had some really good foundations.
Sounds like it.
But anyway, it's good to see you, Rachel. Thank you.
Nice to see you.
Okay. A little levity there. Let's move on to a request for approval of assessment for Succeed Scholarship Program Ms. Courtney Salas Ford.
Morning, Madam Chair, members of the
morning.
board. Courtney Salas Ford for the department. So we are here to consider the request of the Hannah School to use the KTEA 3 comprehensive assessment as a nationally recognized norm reference test, as is required for participation in the Succeed Scholarship Program. For some of the newer members, several years ago when the program was began, the state board approved a list of about 10 different assessments that would meet that requirement. So a school wanting to use an assessment that is not on that list needed to come to you all for additional approval, and so that is what the Hannah School is doing today. If approved, this test could be used by any of the private schools. They are allowed to choose anything from the approved list. And so Ms. Audie Allenbaugh is here as a representative of the Hannah School to answer any questions that you might have. You should have all received the supplemental information that was submitted by them as to the rationale for wanting to use that assessment. And so I'm available to answer any questions, as is Ms. Allenbaugh.
Dr. Moore?
Just to be clear, so once this test is administered by the school and the data sent to y'all, you don't do anything with the data, is that correct?
No, that is correct. We don't really see the data. We're kind of a pass-through of, required by a different section of law. The schools have to report that they did assess all of the students, and if requested by the legislature, provide the information. So if that is requested, we will pass it through, but we don't analyze it or compare it or do anything like that.
Okay, and so schools can, I'm assuming therefore schools are choosing what fits them the best and what will give them the most information about their students.
Correct. They choose based on their population, based on the assessment that they feel is appropriate for their students. And again, that was the part of the rationale provided by the Hannah School, was this was the reason, this was the test that they felt was the best representation for comparison of their students.
And does the law require all students at the school to take it, or just those on the scholarship?
Just those on the scholarship.
Okay, and then obviously that's their choice as to how many students take it or not.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Out of curiosity, all of the tests that were approved, have those been added over time, or is this the original block?
That is the original block.
So the Hannah School decided they were going to do the comprehensive test versus the brief?
Yes, that is the comprehensive.
Okay. So is that the only one that gets on the list then, and not the brief?
That is the only one that's being requested. As a state board, you all are free to add any assessment that you feel meets the requirement, but they are only requesting for the comprehensive.
Ms. Newton?
A couple of questions. What grade level will this test be approved for?
I will let Ms. Allenbaugh address that.
Good morning.
It is a nationally normed test, and it is normed for kindergartens through grade 12, but it can go up to age 21. So any child can take this, but it's clearly, the more you know, the longer the test takes.
Okay. All right, and then how well does this test align with our literacy and math standards?
It lines up very well with it, but not only that, with the population of the Hannah School, these are all children who have specific learning disabilities, specifically dyslexia. And so they have average to above average IQ, so it's normed for not like with non-disabled peers. So we can get a better view of how the idea of the Hannah School is for a child to come in, learn how to read, and then be transitioned back. Some of the tests that are on the list are normed for the special ed population. This test is normed against the general education population, so it gives the parents a better view to how their children can compete in the general education classroom. And so it lines up very well, and the digital format of it's not given digitally, but the scoring is digital, so it's easily drilled down for those target skills that those kids are missing, so that they can have diagnostic teaching and get those pieces remediated quickly. And just to answer your question, Dr. Moore, every child at the Hannah School gets the KTEA, not just the ones on the scholarship.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Any further questions? Okay. With that, I'm looking for a motion to approve or not to approve the assessment. We have a motion to approve the assessment by Dr. Moore.
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Newton. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none, motion passes. Thank you, Ms. Allenbaugh.
Hey, thank you all. Stay safe.
Thank you, Ms. Salas Ford.
Yeah, well, with the board's request and approval, I thought we could go ahead and move on to the afternoon agenda.
Yes.
And might as well get it done.
Might as well.
So the first item on the afternoon agenda is consideration of request for approval, final approval for the division's rules governing special education and related services, Section 18, residential placement. The amendments to these rules were required by legislation in 2019. And again, just a little bit of a backstory for some of the newer members. We started these rules in February of 2020. We actually paused them during the public comment process because of some questions about the legality of one of the provisions in law and in rule. And so an opinion had been requested from the Attorney General's office. We have since received that opinion, deeming that these provisions apply as we have written them in law and in rule. And so now we are just finalizing the rule process. And so we are asking for your approval prior to approval from the Legislative Council.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any questions, comments, discussion? Okay, with that, I'm looking for a motion to approve for final approval.
Move for final approval.
Okay,
To
I have a
approve.
motion by Dr. Moore. Do I have a second? Seconded by Mr. Sutton. Excuse me. All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? Seeing none, motion passes.
Thank you.
Okay. Let's see, do we want to go ahead and break for lunch, or do you want to go ahead and do your report? Let's go ahead, let's go ahead and move forward. Okay. All right, we'll have, I don't have any new business. Do we have any new business with any of the board members? Okay. Ms. Newton?
Just a question, this teacher survey that we got, is someone going to discuss it with us tomorrow or today? Today, okay.
Okay, and then we have a report, Dr. Ivy Pfeffer.
Okay, thank you. There are a couple of things that are posted on the agenda under the reports, and then the teacher survey data. You've got the hard copy of that and a copy of a presentation that I'll walk you through, and then we'll post that. And I'll explain the reason why it wasn't on here as well. But so we had talked last month about every month we would post a DESI update for you. And the purpose of that will be just to give you an idea of some of the things going on here. Every month, on the first Friday of every month, we do a celebration and recognition before we have our first Friday meeting. Part of that is to recognize any kind of personal accomplishments, things going on with our staff, but it's also to recognize and celebrate as we accomplish our goals with our strategic plan or meet some of our milestones. So if you just open that document there, it goes through just some of the things that were highlighted last Friday. In terms of our team members and some of the work milestones that we've met. So if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer your questions, or if you want to talk about anything on there. Otherwise, that report's just there for you to review.
Thank you for sharing. I think some of it I'd already seen on social media, but I appreciate you all putting it together here just so we have a better understanding of what's going on and get to celebrate some and understand better.
Thank you.
I think it's nice to see as well. We sometimes, see difficult things. And so this is, it's always wonderful when we can take a few minutes to celebrate what others have done. So thank you for that.
And I think it's great when you have that balance of personal accomplishments plus the work. And there are, we'll have the links in there that will, if you haven't had time to look at things before the meeting, you can go back. Anytime we can always circle back and talk the board through some of the new information. And as you get questions, it always gives you something to go back to and look at. So.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Pfeffer.
Okay. Anybody, if you're ready, then we can go on and talk about the enrollment report. And that is probably a good segue into then the feedback from the teacher survey. All right. So if you want to open that, what I tried to do was basically capture the state highlights from what we learned from the submission of Cycle 2 data from districts. October 1 is a big date for school districts every year. It's the date where the majority of the student information is submitted every year. So there's a lot of work that goes into that, both at the district level, also from our team, for that data to come in. And a lot of information, and it's important for school districts because it also is data that's used to determine funding, the amount of funding that districts get, either from foundation funding or also based on their ESA funding. So we spent a lot of time looking at that, and I know that we had ongoing concerns about the impact of COVID-19 on a school district's enrollment, but then also not just on that first day of school, but throughout the year. So in putting these together, tried to frame it with questions. So if you want, and something that's very important, and this is a Regents team has done a phenomenal job of creating online tools for you to use so that you can go in and even look at changes over time. So that link there to the Insight state and district level information, if you go to that link, then you can see not just what the Cycle 2 data was, but that gets updated as we go through and gets it, because it has a nightly feed from our student information systems. And so so from just a high state level perspective, we did have an enrollment decrease this year, but overall it was a 1.3% decrease from a state level. Now we know where the issues really get bigger is when you get to the district level. And so we have worked to share information with our co-ops and working with them on strategies so that they can talk to their districts about, okay, let's really dig into our enrollment data. Let's look at this and determine what's going to be the impact of those decreases. If you look at changes per grade level, we can see that the biggest decline was in our kindergarten enrollment, and I think as far as the overall state decline, about 30% of that would have been based on the kindergarten numbers as compared. You can look back over time and see, were the declines something that maybe we would expect or not expect. So if you go to that Insight page, you can see that in some cases we have seen an enrollment decline in certain grades, but you've had enrollment increases in others. And a lot of that depends on the cohort of students as they come through. So when you go online there, you can, you'll be able to drill down whether it's from the state level or from a grade level perspective. We can go through and look at the difference in our traditional K-12 schools versus our charter schools. And so the increase or decrease in enrollment affected different schools a little bit differently. We had some schools that had a very small, or districts that had a very small decrease. versus others that had a much larger. And we can go through and dig into some of those specifics in more detail if you want to. Some of the positive information, when you look at the actual, what we would have considered no-shows, the October percent of no-shows was actually a smaller percent of overall drop students than it was the previous 2 years. So I think some of those very intentional efforts that we worked with districts to focus on probably paid off, and we also gave districts more time to find students before they were dropped, reflective of that first day of school. And so we actually had a much smaller overall number of no-show students.
Do we track homeschool students that are registered with the state in any of this data?
Yes.
Oh, we do, okay.
So if you scroll down to the bottom of page 3 on that report, do you see the chart there that on one side it has the K-12 data, and on the other side it has the homeschool? And so we've got that laid out. Now this was reflective of the cycle report. Those numbers could have changed since then because there may have been some new additions to homeschool or some students that have gone back and re-enrolled in public schools. So there could be some fluctuations there. But at the time this data was pulled, you can see the enrollment increases in homeschool numbers, mainly grades K through 8. There was an increase. 9 through 12, there were some decreases with homeschool from comparison to the year before. Overall, though, the increase in students enrolled in homeschool was pretty significant compared to the prior 2 years. There was those who, when you look at the students who dropped from K-12 public schools, they represented about 15% of the drops this year, compared to only 4% last year. So there was a lot of movement to homeschools, also transfers to the virtual schools. Those represented the biggest changes in the overall public school enrollments. Again, a lot of things we want schools to look at is what did it mean for their individual situation. We want to monitor and see what does the second quarter average daily membership look like. And then right after the holidays, we want to look at another snapshot and see, do we see a change where maybe parents at the end of that first semester, do they make a change in what type of instructional option they want for their students? And then that very last, at the bottom of page 4 of this document, that's where you can go and see the updated information. And at the time I pulled this, about 22% of our students right now in public schools are being are virtual students, according to the instructional option they've chosen.
I'm going to go back to the homeschool for just a minute, and I understand, as a grandparent and a parent with a very young, our first, just want to make sure our kids are safe, and I can understand why the kindergarten numbers, and looks like through about 3rd grade are that where the highest numbers are. But at some point, we're praying that this will be over, and we can safely have in-person school. And thinking about those students coming back to the school districts in this year of homeschooling. And I know some homeschool situations are fantastic, and they're getting a great basics, but in other situations, homeschooling is not quite what it needs to be to get students that foundation that they need. If a student comes back from homeschooling, and I know I should know this, but I guess I've forgotten over the years, is it the district's choice where to place that student as far as grade level, or is it parent's choice? How does that work?
And I know we have Dr. Pride on here, and I think some of our homeschool team was going to look in on this, but there are placement, districts can assess to determine the best placement for students. I think it's going to be a little unique in this year and with this situation because a lot of it's probably going to depend on was this a kindergartner that had never been in the district? Is it a kindergartner that maybe had been in preschool where we already had some information? Is it a grade level kind of there in the middle? And, what kind of programming did the parent have, as far as homeschool? So this might represent a little bit different thought process and analysis for school districts. Of course, if you're in the upper grades and you have the transcribable credit in an accredited program, that helps provide the information. I think we have some of our homeschool team here, if you would like for them to give you a little bit of information as well.
That sure, and one more question along that line. Have we, as a state, given any thought to giving districts support when these students start coming back? Because I feel like at some point they probably will, or not. Maybe not all of them, but some will come back. Are we thinking as a state, how can we best support these districts to, if students are behind, how to get them back on track? Because we know that we want to have them on track by third grade, and so what are we going to do to support those districts to help with that?
And I'll let them go ahead and come up and make a couple of comments. And while they're doing that, there are options for districts to enroll homeschool students to take courses or to participate in different types of learning options. So we're hoping that districts are thinking through what some of those options can look like. So, you can still be a homeschool student, but participate in some of that, especially around that reading instruction, that early literacy would be really important. But good morning. And Madam Chair, if you don't mind, we can let our homeschool office introduce themselves and see if they have just a couple of things they want to share.
Please do.
I'm Trish Wilcox, Program Advisor with Homeschool. I do want to address the issue of hopefully next year when the students will re-enroll back into the public school. The way the law is now, the law asks for a portfolio and for transcripts, especially for the older students. If the parents do not provide that, then the school does have the right to test them for grade level purposes, but the law also says that they cannot go below the grade level that the parent says. But the schools have been really, really working well with the parents. If they test, and it seems like the parents are working well with the schools too. Once they put them back into school, and we already have some parents who are re-enrolling them back. And if they do not have documentation, the school goes ahead and tests them and then lets them play, say like they're going back into 10th grade, they let them play catch up to provide for those, classes maybe that they did not pass. So they're kind of working on two at the same level. So I did want to say that. And then I do hope, I have, being a former educator, I have worried about the elementary grades. We do have some wonderful, wonderful homeschool parents. We have great ones. But we also have those that we know are going to fall through the cracks. And being an educator, I do worry about that reading, being strong and being there. So I am hoping that between the state and the school that we can do something to help those guys. So.
Yeah, my name is Josh Mesker, and I am also a program advisor. Just to kind of explain our roles and kind of how they're split a bit more before I go on. We're certainly cross-trained, but Trish focuses more on equipping the public school districts around this issue, and I liaison more closely with the parents themselves. But of course, we handle both when needed, but it became very necessary to have a liaison for the public school districts and a liaison for the for the parents specifically. And so I work with the parents a bit more closely on a regular basis. And I know there's been a lot of discussion specifically on the impact of COVID on lower grade school attendance, kindergarten, for example. And I did just want to share with you an insight that we have based upon numbers that we're constantly running and reports that we're running. So yes, homeschool numbers are up this year, and we all know the reason why. But one thing I wanted to share that I think is an important insight is last school year, our grand total of homeschool students was 22,251. Of kindergarten students, out of that total, kindergarten students represented 7.4% of registered homeschool students. But this year, to date, that number of registered kindergarten students in homeschool out of the total that we have, at least so far, is 10.8%. And so that's not an insignificant increase. And so that's something to just take note of. And these numbers, in our opinion, certainly track with many of the phone calls that we've received over several months, in our view, about parents calling us and for their own personal reasons, whatever they may be, going, hey, this virtual option through the public school for us is not working for our kindergarten student, our first grade student, our second grade student. And so we are going to temporarily enroll in homeschool, pick our own program, and then we're going to re-enroll in public school. And so we very much expect these numbers to level off and normalize at some point. But ultimately, we won't know or get a full accurate picture of what these numbers look like until the end of this school year, when those numbers stop moving around, because we have, as Trish has mentioned, we have students withdrawing from homeschool, going back to public school. We have students withdrawing from public school, going into homeschool. And so though these numbers are very fluid, but we certainly have seen an increase in, one, the overall numbers, and two, an increase in homeschooling for kindergarten and those lower grades. And as I said, at least part of that reason, we believe, is due to the virtual option for many parents just not working out for them. And we don't presume to know what those reasons are, as much as we just have those conversations and we equip those parents as best as possible with the homeschool information that they need, and in particular, what the process will look like when they transfer back to public school, because they intend to do so. And that's a crucial part of that transition. And so we try to make that as smooth as we possibly can. And so we tell parents, regardless of the program that you choose when you homeschool, make sure you keep really good records of what you bring the student through, the grades, tests, assignments, just showing that academic progress, because the school can ask for that portfolio, they can test that student, and we want all of these students that are going to be transferring back to public school to not miss any time whatsoever. And so that's been a big focus for us.
For those that you talked about that have transitioned back in already, are you doing any sort of testing? Do we have any idea academically where these kids are? Are they ahead, on track? Have we even gathered that data yet? I don't know.
As far as having an idea, that is not data that we would gather. That is what the school districts would gather. So we have no way of knowing that.
Reporting that back to you so that we can know.
I wish. Just suck because we worry about them.
I believe in law it allows a parent to waive kindergarten for students. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
And are those students included in these? Does that happen? And if so, are those included as homeschool students, or are they separate? Do we know?
You're asking specifically about the students where they get a kindergarten waiver from their school district. Are those students counted as homeschool students? They are not.
Okay. And do we know if there's an additional number of students doing that this year, or?
I don't believe we have a number on those that would have filed waivers, that I know of.
Certainly not from our office.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that, yes, we would have the data on those that are enrolled or in the public school or in the homeschool.
Thank y'all for presenting.
Is that something that we need to track as far as numbers that are choosing to waive kindergarten?
I don't believe that's something we have ever tracked in the past. To, you know, that what I know with, we have projections for numbers of, you know, students over time. I can check with a Regents team on that, just as far as if that is captured anywhere other than just at a district level.
I would be curious to know, because I don't know if parents would even know about it or not, how many students that would be going directly into first grade.
And it is a very good point to consider, because in a district, and again, a lot of this, where the big impact is also going to be is at that district level, thinking through the next year, because they're thinking through staffing issues and, you know,
Sure.
building issues. If you do all of a sudden now have a large influx of kindergartners or first graders, that, you know, changes what you would have normally expected through just, you know, your regular cycle of students. That would be interesting.
Yeah.
So.
Thank you so much.
Yes, and as far as the teacher survey data, I guess I need to step up here for the presentation. And actually, I was going to see if Joel wanted to talk about that survey before I talk about any of the results from that, because he was instrumental working with our team and the co-ops in developing the survey. So let him start off before we talk about any information.
Yeah, so, you know, I think last month was it whenever, I think it was kind of stated, hey, it would be really nice to have this kind of information directly from the teachers, and then Dr. Pfeffer and just everyone, the speed at which everyone worked together was amazing. It was cool to get to be a small part in that, and so like Carly, Saracini, Andy Sullivan, and then a couple of co-op directors, Kathy Swan and Brad Horn, from Arkansas River and Wilbur Mills, I believe, started crafting questions and putting this together. I realized I'm not a survey writer, is what I gained from this. It's hard to craft questions that are going to get the data that you want, and that also is going to be something that you can then use to support. And I think everyone did a really good job of thinking about that, of like, let's get questions that are going to be useful, and not just say, okay, yeah, we know this, but now what? It's like, okay, these are ways we can support, these are ways that we can really think through that. So I thought everyone did a great job of putting that together. It looked very nice, just the layout of it, and I think was that a Regents team who did that. And so yeah, a good job by everyone coming together. So.
All right, so you have a handout, but we'll just kind of walk through some of the pieces from this survey data. Let's see, Dan. Okay. Okay. So there were about 20 questions, and the survey was set up so that responses could be aggregated by co-op region. Sorry about that. Does everybody have a copy now? Okay. And so the survey covered areas such as professional challenges and professional advantages that teachers have experienced this year, questions on digital content, social emotional support, student engagement, and teacher support. And the timeline, we wanted to be able to at least have an initial conversation with you all today. So the survey was shared through co-ops to school districts on Tuesday, November 3rd, and we asked them to try to really focus on a week, so from the 3rd to the 10th, in encouraging teachers to respond. And so last night I just went through and tried to pull out some of the data and the information and put it into just a report for you all for us to have a conversation, and then we can talk about what's next. But as of last night, there were 10,677 responses. So if you look at that in terms of the total number of our certified teachers, that would be about 32% in terms of a response rate. And we did have responses from all of the co-op regions in Pulaski County. And there were responses from teachers at different grade levels. They were asked whether or not they were a teacher in primarily grades like pre-K through 5, I believe middle level, and then secondary. And there were, and as we go through and we can look at more data, the responses per co-op, I believe Crowley's Ridge had about 45% if you look at the total number of responses and their total number of certified teachers. So they had one of the higher response rates, and I looked through a few of the others, and I don't remember exact numbers from the others. But as co-ops really look at this and have conversations with their teachers, their support staff, and look at that, we're going to really encourage them, if they don't have a good response rate, to start looking at how they can go back and gather some more data. So when asked about professional challenges that teachers have faced this year, the highest percentages responded to the overall engaging virtual learners, I think, stood out as the biggest challenge. Mastering virtual instruction and the amount of additional time that is being required of them this year as compared to years past. They also mentioned teacher staff well-being and absences due to illness or quarantines. And Joe, I'm not sure on this question if the absences were more teacher-related or student-related or both, probably both. I don't know that we teased that out well enough in the question, but.
Right. Yeah, I would assume both, but that's right. We didn't really specify which.
Yes. But just thinking about the whole teaching virtual and face-to-face students, as we look at some of the more specific questions, the question that best describes their teaching responsibility, you can see that the majority of respondents are teaching both remote students, so virtual students who are not on site at all, and face-to-face. That is also reflected in a district survey that we did, and you'll have a link to be able to go in and look at the district survey. We've actually done 2 phases in the district survey. And but when you start thinking about what teachers have been asked to do this year, and when you implement a virtual option, and we know that from district to district, those virtual options even vary as to what they look like. Teaching students virtually is much different than teaching face-to-face. I think we've learned that even here in these board meetings on a much smaller scale. Doing presentations like this, I mean, it changes how you interact with people, and it changes how you plan. It changes how you collect feedback. And in some cases, in some districts, I believe I have this, on the next slide, and this is actually from the district survey, you can see that you have teachers teaching both in-person and virtual students. The in-person teaching is recorded and uploaded for virtual students in some cases. In others, you have where they're teaching both at the same time. So some of that scheduling and managing students who are both on a Zoom and in person, that can look very different because, just like we're here, some of us are here, some of us are attending remotely. It's hard sometimes to know, if Mr. Williamson is, needing something or able to be as engaged as if he was sitting right here. And I don't know about you all, and I know teachers are learning how to even use the technology, but when we share screens and we're only seeing 4 people versus a while ago where I could see everybody, and maybe there's a way to change that, but that drives me crazy when I can't see everybody. So I'm worried about Mr. Williamson, but I can see him right now. But if I couldn't see you, and I know some of you out there, I can't see you, that worries me because I'm trained to interact with people personally. So we know that that's a challenge for teachers.
Or should we wait till the end?
No, go ahead. I can talk all day, so interrupt me, please.
This concerns me a lot because, to be clear, we as a state did not require districts to have a total virtual option. Is that correct? So they had total choice as to how to do this. And to me, I don't feel like a lot of districts, which I know very extenuated circumstances, got input from their teachers or staff before deciding what to do. And seeing that it's being done very differently concerns me, especially in larger districts where they have the capacity to split up teachers and not overburden them, but chose not to do that.
And that's true, but I think we also have to consider the timing and the way this was thrust upon everybody. Right. So, I don't think we can sit and necessarily say good, bad, right, or wrong.
Right.
And we know, I know from personal conversations that I'm having with superintendents, many of them are stopping and rethinking and making modifications. In the district survey, you'll see that there's about 56% of districts that have actually done some type of modification to their everyday schedules, whether that's providing a virtual day, providing some additional planning time, doing some early releases to allow some more time for teachers. But I think what you're hitting on is what we have to be thinking about for the future.
Right.
And I know when we brought you all those waivers, at the very beginning, the Ready for Learning waivers, part of the need to do those was because we knew as districts implemented either hybrid or virtual options that it was going to be difficult and they were going to need some of that flexibility. And I appreciate the difficulty you all had with grappling with that decision. But yes, Dr. Moore, it is something that we have to make sure that we continue to work on with districts. As Ms. Newton was saying earlier, identify those things that really do work well. What are those structures that you need to have in place if you're going to do a certain type of virtual model versus a different type of virtual model? Because you can see on this slide, you have a spectrum of involvement with your virtual students.
Right, and I know what my ideal would be for my kid would be if you're doing virtual, you're seeing the teacher daily. And we have districts where, which is great, they're not overburdening the teachers if you have virtual only options, but you have virtual only and they're only seeing the teacher once a week. And so I would like, to the extent we can, to get more information about what's going on as we make future decisions of what we allow districts to do.
So towards the end of the presentation, I'll share with you kind of our thoughts on how we get closer to what you're talking about.
Yeah, and I guess I'm saying none of this to critique districts. I know we're all under tremendous stress and are making very hard decisions, but I'm glad we have this data now. Second to that, I guess my question is, so we know that districts, a lot of districts, gave the students options to do virtual for all year, but some districts, by and large, most students are in person except for when that kid is in quarantine. So is this referring to, the student who had to leave school for 3 weeks because they're quarantined, or a student who's chosen to do virtual for the semester?
So these are students who are identified as virtual students because that's the instructional option that was chosen.
Okay.
So remember when I said about 22% right now have been reported as virtual students, and we want to watch those numbers as the year progresses. It was earlier in September, that number was up over 25%, so it has dropped down to about 22%. We're going to ask districts to continue to update that in the student management system. And so really at semester would be a time that they could update those instructional options that parents are choosing. And it will be interesting to see if more students not only come back to school after semester, do more change in terms of their instructional options. Had a superintendent that sent me some information yesterday. They've been looking, and in their elementary schools, they have much lower percentages of virtual students now than they did at the beginning of the school year through their elementary grades, but they have more of their high school students who have chosen virtual now than they were at the beginning of the school year. So again, those are questions at that local level, you really want to look at in terms overall of how successful are students being.
I think that's great, because it should be treated differently for elementary and high school, and I hope that districts are able to make changes as needed. I'm looking at the 45 districts where the teacher's teaching both in person and virtual at the same time, and you're doing that at the kindergarten. It's very difficult. And our teachers are working so hard to make that happen, but potentially also, hopefully, districts are working with them to see what changes might need to be made at semester.
I just have one quick question back on the responsibilities page, and this is very basic. There were 380 people that answered no answer. Is more than just teachers taking this? And if so, who are those people?
So we're not tracking it, at an individual level. Mm-hmm. So I don't know that we know the answer to that. Okay. Now, let's see, where you see no answer. I don't know if that was because of the way the question was framed. That they had something that didn't apply to them. Okay. That's awesome. Teach remote students, face-to-face, remote and face-to-face.
It probably went out to instructional facilitators, library media specialists, principals.
Curriculum coordinators. So it may be that it went out to more than just classroom teachers, and so it might have been not quite as applicable.
Okay, I was just trying to compare the 10,677, 32% of which are certified, to that. Okay, thanks.
Well, and again, there could be, as it goes out, if it was sent to someone who doesn't necessarily represent the certified teaching staff,
that's fair.
It's just when you look at those numbers, if those 10,000 whatever were representative of our 30-something thousand certified teachers, and it may not be an exact match. So, yeah, as Joel said, this is not, the most scientific of surveys but it is designed to get that good information, and we really want to encourage our co-ops and districts to, help think through how do we continue to try to get that feedback.
Fantastic. I don't want any question of mine to come across. This is so awesome, so thank you very much.
I've learned a lot about my lack of abilities to survey. It's hard. It is very hard. I know. So the student engagement, on-site versus virtual instruction, there were a couple of different questions here. And so as you look more into it, you can see the difference in how teachers feel about being able to provide engaging instruction to in-person versus virtual students. And
maybe we're not there. On this bottom one, I guess it would be the next slide. Am I reading it correctly that the majority of teachers don't feel like they're getting regular communication with their students?
Are you looking at the next
so
one?
on mine, they're on both here. I'm looking at this bottom one, which, yeah.
Sorry.
So that blue bucket, it says what percentage of your virtual remote students are regularly communicating? It looks like the majority say that basically they're not.
Okay, hang on. I think I'm on a different slide than you are.
That one.
Communicating, or this is on-site?
One more.
Okay. On-site versus virtual instruction.
That one. The blue bucket right there on the left-hand side.
Mm-hmm. Oh, okay. Yes. Regularly communicating and are submitting. So here on this, yes. A high number picked that between 0 and 25%, yes, are regularly communicating. Not regularly, yes, yes. So on this question, and Joel, help me make sure I'm interpreting this correctly. In an ideal situation, you would want more on that right-hand side, correctly? You would want high percentages of your virtual students regularly. The fact that you've got more on the lower end is concerning. Yes. Yes, and the engagement in that that communication is of concern. And when you look at the district survey, the same trends emerge. In so these next two actually come from the district survey. So if you're measuring student engagement, comparing on-site students versus virtual with regards to their attendance, you can see that there's a lot less concern with on-site student engagement as the virtual. And the same thing with when asked about the mastery of learning objectives. And this one did come from the district survey, but just it does match what we're hearing from the teachers.
That's what concerns me so much about the K-3 level. You know, it is, you know, we see that they don't feel like those that they're even engaging virtually are mastering those basic concepts that we're going to need. And then, you know, we throw in homeschool with that. You know, even if next year is a, quote, normal year, I still think that we're going to have a lot of problems that we need to address. And as a state, we need to be thinking about those now. What can we do to support districts and teachers and in trying to play catch up with those K-3 students?
Yeah, well, no, I agree, and I guess my comments earlier, I didn't mean to say that we shouldn't have virtual, because I know that needs to be an option. It's how it's been set up in each district, and similar to our homeschool conversation, I think, you know, any student that hasn't been in person, which is not a critique that they didn't choose that. I think it's fantastic that we have those options to keep families safe, but we're going to need to do some really comprehensive dives into where they are, and potentially even, you know, as we're thinking about mastery-based skill, look at school differently, I think.
We as a state, remediation has been difficult for us. I mean, just even thinking about teaching in past years, that's been hard for us to do, because you're trying to balance those students that are over here, and then the gifted, and then the others, and it's been difficult. And so trying to bring those others along, it's going to be something that I think that we need to address through PLCs and professional development. That I don't think that we can wait till next fall and say, oh no, we've got a problem, what are we going to do about it? I think we're going to have to realize that we're going to have a problem, and what are we going to do about it? So.
And I'm glad you mentioned PLCs, because our districts that have been part of that PLC process have had a much easier time with making sure that student needs are met, and in terms of trying to structure how they have their different options set up for students, and thinking through that whole process of really identifying those essential skills, and how do we make sure that those skills are really being taught, and how are we assessing student learning. One of the disappointments that we had when we saw the survey results was so many teachers said that they were not aware of the back to school playbook, because that playbook really was around what you're talking about in terms of making sure that that time that students weren't in school over the spring, that we really focused on getting those students caught back up, closing any of those gaps that they had with unfinished learning. So I think it's, yes, I think you bring up a good point that, you know, that is another piece of evidence that shows if they weren't aware of that, then, you know, were we able to even start out the year really getting kids to where we need them to be. So, so if we look on through here, so teacher support. Oh, wait a minute, I missed one that I think, a couple that are important here before we get to what you all are really talking about as far as what do we need to do. I do appreciate the fact that this question was in the survey about professional advantages, and when you look here at some of the things that teachers have acknowledged, you know, can be a benefit, the access to technology and digital tools. I can't remember for sure. I'd have to look at the larger text here with when it talks about instructional and educational. I think it's about those opportunities for digital instruction and digital teaching. There are some advantages to that. I think when you look at the flexibility of digital learning, I think that there are a lot of things that teachers see as positives about that. I think that it just still really goes back to trying to do, you know, both virtual and in-person instruction, learning it themselves, dealing with the other stressors of just the pandemic itself, and the impact that it does have on all of us personally. You know, we all know that we have felt stresses from that.
So along that line, I think that student access to technology has been improved because so many districts have prepared for the instance that a student might have to go home for quarantine, so that they now have a Chromebook, which they did not have before. And so, you know, I can see that as being a positive out of this, that so many more students now have access to technology that and internet that did not have that before. So.
And I think it also really does, like in this next slide, really, when we've talked about the whole child for a long time, and you know, I think it also helps us to really investigate when we say, okay, do we have access to resources that support mental health, social, emotional learning? And while a large number of teachers did say yes, that they had that, you know, there are several that said they're not sure. And I think it's going to cause us to really go back and be able to identify those more clearly. And I know that that's something that we're looking at in collaboration with the Safe Schools Committee, and really being able to clearly identify and help districts identify what types of supports do they have access to. So one of the questions in the survey asked teachers about whether or not they had opportunities to give input into the curriculum and instruction, and there were several that said that they did, but I think that we always can do more to make sure that there is opportunity for input, because if we're going to talk about teacher support, we need to make sure that we're providing the kind of support that teachers need. Really looking at targeted professional development. And as Dr. Moore said, helping districts to really think through going forward, what are the kinds of options that are going to be provided? You know, will every district continue to provide an all virtual option going forward as part of their LEA? And should they? And in some cases, you know, maybe it's not that every district does a separate virtual option. There are opportunities to collaborate within a co-op to combine those resources and be able to dedicate some teachers to all virtual and be part of a different group. So those are all things that we know that if we start now helping to think through, helping to identify, providing some models and some structures out there, then you can really get into the kind of targeted professional development that's going to equip everybody to be ready. And again, that back-to-school playbook, there may be a really good place for that coming back to school after the first of the year. Because in some cases, it may be almost like a new start for some students.
Yeah, I wanted to echo those exact same sentiments, bouncing off what I said earlier. I expect districts in the future, the pandemic is not just going to go away, so I expect next school year parents will still want a virtual option, and I do expect it to look differently than this year, and I think that is a great suggestion. Schools could get together to have a co-op virtual school versus every district replicating the same thing that has resulted in teachers being overstressed when we could have made the decision to split that up. And I would like to see more districts split that up in the future, especially in the lower grades, so that all students are getting synchronous teaching. Students are seeing teachers every day, and when they're not, those teachers have the time to follow up. And I know right now in a lot of districts they don't have that time to follow up with students that they're not finding.
I have a question as well, because you mentioned PLCs a little bit ago. This is a little bit different question, but we were really making some great headway on our RISE training and our PLC training. Have we been able to continue with that even in the middle of all of this pandemic?
So trainings have continued. The PLC work has also continued, but I'm going to see, and of course I can't see everybody right now, and actually, Dan, we could probably exit out of this, but if Dr. Pride is still on, if she can talk a little bit about RISE. And Missy Wally was going to be watching, and I can let her kind of go into some of the PLC, just a brief overview of that.
And also, would that training look different virtually if you're teaching reading virtually versus in person? I'm not a teacher myself, but I'm just curious if that is a need that we need to look at.
I was going to say, Dr. Pride, are you?
Can you hear me? Can you guys hear me? Yes, good morning. Yes, in terms of RISE training, we have continued that training to some degree, as much as possible under guidelines. We do have a virtual pathway, which is pathway D. So amidst the pandemic, we knew that there would be some needs to support virtual training for the science of reading, though it's not our RISE training, which we have kept that, to be a face-to-face training. We have provided an alternate option that's totally virtual. So we have continued that training for the science of reading to support instruction in schools.
Okay.
Because we were not going to do any virtual training on RISE earlier when all of this, I think, first started happening. But now we've changed and will do a virtual training. Did I hear her say that?
So in terms of the science of reading,
yes,
we have a alternate pathway for teachers to be able to demonstrate proficiency, and that is a virtual pathway, but it's not our RISE training. So there are multiple pathways for phase one for the science of reading training, and the one that most people take advantage of is RISE training, which is face-to-face, and it will continue to be face-to-face.
Okay.
But we do have a virtual option should someone need to take advantage of that option.
Okay, great, thank you.
Just as far as kind of going back to a couple of things that Ms. Newton had asked. So our team is really looking at what we've provided in the past as far as details around digital learning, because a virtual option really comes out of a larger context of digital learning. And one of the things we want to make sure of, and there has been confusion as far as what districts perceive as a requirement that they had to offer a virtual option, but like Dr. Moore said, that was not a requirement that was imposed on districts. Districts chose to do that because they wanted to be able to offer as many options as possible to families so that students would remain part of their district. What we said was you had to have blended learning so that you were able to have instruction continuing, whether you could be face-to-face with your students or whether the teacher or the student or both could not be there at a given time. And so I think, though, that as things get implemented, you sometimes lose sight of some of those things. So we want to make sure that we have really strong understanding and common terminology for districts to think through, and then really go through and look at those different types of options when you talk about virtual learning, because you could have virtual learning that is synchronous with, like Dr. Moore said, for an elementary student, it's really important to have that regular check-in with the teacher where even if it's a virtual option, but you can still be talking and seeing a teacher face-to-face, or something that's more asynchronous that is more self-paced, and maybe your check-ins are not quite as regular. So our team is working to kind of put together and capture what different models look like and what they might look like when implemented in schools. We want to bring in some of those schools that have experience with virtual programs, that have had that either through some of our charters that have all virtual options, or our districts that have been implementing different types of virtual options, and even some schools this year that have successfully built in a virtual option. So we want them to come in and look at all of this and then bring you some information possibly in January for you to be able to look at and say, these are the kinds of models going forward that we would feel good about districts implementing. Some of them would require some waivers in terms of just different things depending on what type of option is being implemented. So our plan is over the next couple of months to try to refine that and bring that to you in January to look at. We feel like that's going to give districts a whole lot better picture of what things look like going forward. They're trying to think through and even start planning calendars for next year. And we think that having some of this information will help them in making decisions about what their school schedules can look like.
The state provided the opportunity for each school district to have the platform, the state provided platform for digital. How long does that contract last?
So we can have that has the option to be able to be extended for another year, and we've been in conversations with school districts about the success of that. Again, depending on how it's been implemented, districts who are using the platform and content together are having a much easier time as far as it being more interactive and easier for them to implement than those who maybe are only using the content with a different management system. So there's been a learning curve with that as well. We do feel like, though, that there needs to be an option for another year of
that's what I was wondering.
I'm not trying to say sustainability, but a consistency as districts continue to try to ramp up and identify how they want to approach teaching and learning with digital tools long term.
Do we know about how many percent-wise districts chose to use the linking learning?
So I have the numbers written down. There are, and Stacy, can you text me? Because we had this conversation the other day.
We did
know on the, I'm sorry?
Yeah, I think it was about 180 districts who were actually participating in some manner, and about 25% of those were using it full time. Do those numbers sound right, Dr. Pepper?
I think that is correct. And as far as the number of students who are enrolled in some form of using the content, I think it was about 40% of
Yeah, I wanna say it's
students
like
statewide that
17,000.
would be represented in those numbers. Now, it's not, it's different from being enrolled in a full course, where they participate in a full course. In many cases, it's being used to supplement the district's curriculum.
Well, I know that, like, if the student has to go home or whatever, then they switch to the Lincoln Learning or whatever platform they're using. So, I'm glad that you're thinking about the continuity of continuing it for next year.
We feel like just in the overall pandemic response, the response is going to take longer to fully get people to where we can look forward and really sustain beyond a couple of years.
Dr. Moore?
Yes, I do have another question. As we're looking, I know I've heard some districts talk about next semester potentially dropping a day and doing 4 days in person, 1 day virtual. Is that something that needs to be approved? Or was that approved in our package of waivers?
So we have some districts that have moved to having a virtual day once a week. In those cases, they have modified their Ready for Learning plan. But in those instances, because that is a day, a regularly planned day, where students would not have access to on-site instruction, we have required them to make available on-site services for students who need that, and encourage them to think of it in terms as possibilities to create like a learning hub for students. So it may be that that day doesn't look as typical as the other days. It may be that there are fewer students on campus for a given amount of time, but they still need to be able to be there. Same thing with districts who may be having an early dismissal. And, again, that's part of the way we're looking at continuing to support, knowing that teachers do need some time, and if that helps them make the other days more quality learning days, we understand that that is something that might be needed. But we also want to make sure that when we think long-term, that's why we want to set up better models, because we don't want to be shortchanging the amount of time with students. Because again, there are a limited number of teacher-student interaction days anyway in a given year, and we want to be able to maximize every minute we can.
Yes, I second that. To me, early dismissal to some extent is a Band-Aid to the larger issue of districts putting too much on teachers, and they need to step back and make a better decision and include parents at the table.
Yes,
Certainly.
and again, as numbers of positive cases grow in districts, that makes it even more difficult, and we can feel the pressure that the districts are feeling just because of the calls that we get, and so we want to recognize that in local situations, in some cases, it's very, very tough right now, and they're feeling that pressure and that strain. But we want them to also understand, there are those ways to relieve some of that pressure, and so this is going to be a constant work in progress, a constant communication back and forth, and we want to do that. And I know Missy stepped in the room. I didn't want to go too far into the PLC conversation because I was afraid I would miss out on something that I know that they've been doing. But, if you have any specific PLC questions, but I do know that our cohort schools have been instrumental in helping to provide continuous webinars for other districts around some of the tools and the resources, and sharing the way they've planned and structured their learning options for kids. So she's down here if you have anything in particular you need her to verify.
I just was curious as to how our PLCs have been working when some of our students are in the blended model, virtual model, and in person.
They've made it work. They've
Okay.
made it work. With the project has continued on, and as far as their coaches coming in, we still have coaches coming in. The only ones that are making it work virtual, as far as the coaches coming in for the project, are the ones who are coming from Canada, who can't get across the, but As far as the students with, the only struggle that we've kind of talked about is the intervention piece, but as far as the Tier 1 instruction, the PLC schools have expressed that they were ready for this. Just being able to, they had identified their essential standards and they knew the skills that each kid needed and they were ready to address. And I think Joel could probably speak on that as well from Quitman from your webinar, which was awesome. They're ready, they're prepared. And they've been instrumental with the playbook and providing lessons. We do webinars pretty much every other week. And we are still having our cohort meetings. Anthony Muhammad came a couple weeks ago and met with everybody. And then we'll have another one in January where all of the cohort administrators will come back together and we'll network.
Great.
Ask for the PLCs that you mentioned, the intervention piece, and I know that like in my district that's been a challenge, especially at the secondary levels. Like how can they don't feel comfortable sending kids, you know, to all these different rooms just for, you know, safety reasons and all of that. Have you found some schools that have been able to really provide those interventions, especially with kind of those secondary levels where kids maybe are more mixed, that they've been able to be successful in that?
Well, really on the secondary level, I can't really speak on that one because I don't have a specific example. On the elementary level, they are still using Zoom. They're keeping their kids in the classroom and they're Zooming from intervention teachers who may be across the hall, but they're still Zooming just so that they're not changing and doing their small group intervention. But as far as secondary, I do not have an example that I can speak. I know that they're working on it. And in our last cohort meeting, when we come together to our network meeting, and that's what a couple of the principals requested, is just more guidance in that. So we're doing that in January. That's our topic.
Okay, thank you, appreciate it. All right, if we don't have any more questions or comments or discussion, that is it for our agenda, if I'm not mistaken. Lunch is ready, and it is upstairs in room 201A. Thank you all for your time today. It was a good agenda that we got through pretty quickly. So with nothing else, we'll adjourn, and I'll see you all tomorrow in the morning at 9 a.m. Thank you. Thanks for everyone joining us on Zoom. Have a great